Someone in the family has passed away and you and your siblings have inherited a property. Multiple heirs, maybe siblings, maybe not, maybe cousins, other extended members of the family. What should you do before you go forward? I'm real estate broker Sharon McLennan, and I'm here to explain what the steps are that are involved in that process to help you reach a smooth transition. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. When you inherit a property with other people, it is a complicated situation. A lot of times we don't understand exactly how nuanced that situation actually can be. And a lot of the challenge comes from the fact that the heirs who have inherited are in specifically very different situations. Their financial needs are different, liquidity is different. There may be a situation of emotional attachment to the home. If it was the family home, say it was a parent who's passed and it's a family home that is being passed on, some siblings may be more attached to the home. There's a different emotional connection. The timelines are uncertain, and just overall, there are generally different opinions as to what needs to be done for everyone to move forward. So when you have inherited a property together with others, the very first thing that you want to do is pause and assess where everyone is, because depending on their perspectives, this could definitely have an impact on how you move forward. Remember, with inherited property, everyone has to agree with the strategy that is going to be put forward to move along with the property. Is it something that you're going to keep? Is it something that you're going to sell? Is it something that you're going to rent? How is that property ultimately going to be disposed of? What will be the disposition of the property? And to be able to reach consensus on that, everyone has to agree. So I've had multiple experiences where we have 4, 5, even 6, 7 folks, 7 different people who've inherited a property, and none of them have the same idea as to what the next step should be. So before doing anything, it's really important to assess where everyone is and make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what the next step should be as it relates to the property. All right, so why is this process so emotionally challenging? It is coming as a part of a loss. Someone has passed away, so there's a grief factor. I recently worked with some siblings, and one sibling in particular was not ready to move on. And she said, I am dealing with the loss of my mother. I don't want to deal with the financial impact of disposing of the family home right now. I need more time to grieve. That is a very understandable and actually something that is quite common. So making sure that you understand where everyone is in their individual grieving process and making time for them to be able to get through that process before you really start to double down and focus on having exclusively financial decisions, because they may need to spend some more time talking through the grief and dealing with the loss before they're ready to move on. Another common situation is family dynamics. In a lot of families, there are different members, particularly when you have a large group of siblings, who have played a different role, right? So there's the eldest who maybe has been the one that has helped co-parent the others, and that eldest sibling is the one who has more weight in terms of the usual decision making. At least that's been the family dynamic up till now. Or it may be it's the youngest who's always been the one that everybody's been deferring to and wants to support. And so they have a more weighty involvement in the decision-making process. Or it could be a middle child. It could be any number of factors, because every family has different dynamics. And so it's really important to take that into consideration. If you're in a family where the eldest, and I'll use that one because I'm the eldest, that's something that I'm familiar with, where the eldest has been the one to speak up first. That's probably not going to change at this time. So make sure that you, if that's not your role or you're not comfortable with that being the dynamics going forward, that you make time to explore that and have a strategy to address that. A third component that makes this a little bit more challenging than it sometimes has to be is the financial pressure. What is the shape of the house? What is the timeline on the mortgage? Was there a reverse mortgage? Was it owned free and clear? Are the taxes paid up? Are there any repairs that need to be made in the short term? And is there any liquidity? Any of the family members or the estate, does it have the funds to take care of it? Because while we want to acknowledge and give people time to grieve, you don't want to have that grieving process play out while the property goes into foreclosure, because at the end, then everybody loses and the entire family, the entire inheritance is lost. So trying to make sure that you balance that. And then last but not least is communication gaps. Again, families, family dynamics. I've worked with siblings who have just really been very close. They've gotten along really well. They've all been in lockstep in terms of what the next step should be. We're going to honor dad, and then we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and everybody's in agreement. I've worked with other families where the siblings don't get along. They probably haven't gotten along in a very long time, and there are groups. So maybe two sisters or a sister and a brother, they are a group that usually has one opinion, and it's usually in opposition to another group or another sibling. All of that will fold down into the communication gaps that you could have. So when you have a situation where one sibling does not want to talk to another sibling, or one sibling doesn't want to receive or respond to communication from another sibling, that makes it a lot more difficult, because now what we're working through is how do we get consensus. The most important thing in situations like this is to make sure that we can have a practical, meaningful discussion where the emotions, as much as possible, are put off to the side, and we make a decision based on what is the best outcome, what is the best result for the family moving forward. So keep that in mind. The real estate is often just one part of a already complicated and emotionally challenging situation. Just because it's real estate and we're dealing with resources and numbers, that doesn't make it any less complicated. In fact, it probably makes it more complicated. So keep that in mind as you're trying to plot your course as to what is going to happen next as it relates to this property and this inheritance. As I alluded to earlier, the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we have legal clarity. And I am not an attorney, so this is not to be construed as legal advice. I am a real estate broker, and I'm just speaking with you from the perspective of disposing of the real estate. But as it relates to the real estate and any other assets that you have, it's really important to have legal clarity. And legal clarity speaks to who actually owns the property. Who holds the title to the property, and in what proportion? Was the home to be equally divided between all parties? Did one group get a higher percentage, or was there some other complicated calculation that was included in determining the ownership? That is the very first thing that you want to determine, because once you know who has legal ownership, then we know who has to be a part of the decision-making process. The next thing that you want to find out is whether or not you have to go through probate. Does the estate have a probate proceedings? Does all of that have to be sorted out before you can reasonably look to transfer the property? The worst thing in the world that you want to do is everybody agrees, you reach out, you list the property, you get it sold, and then, a couple of weeks ahead of closing, you're now realizing that you have this probate issue that has to be addressed before you can sell the property. A lot of expense, a lot of time wasted. You definitely don't want to do that. So we want to get clarity on what the probate requirements are. Once we've determined that, that will help us to figure out who has the decision-making authority. So Is the property in a trust? Is there an executor to a will? Who has the authority to make decisions about the sale? And that person is going to be the one that will lead the charge in terms of making the decisions about what the next steps would be. And then, of course, determining how we get to a point where we have unanimous consent, or the majority of those who are inheriting the property are aligned with the decision, so that we can move forward. Until that has been sorted out and that has been established, it's really very difficult to move forward. All right, so decision number one is that we have to align on what the desired outcome is, right? What is it that we are planning to do? I've had cases where we've had one sibling or two siblings who want to stay in the property. They want to move into, or they're already there and they don't want to leave. That has happened. The other siblings are not in support of that. We've had situations where some siblings or one sibling wants to buy out the other siblings. That could also be an option. Whatever the decision is, whatever the desired outcome is, we need to make sure that we all align, everyone, all of the heirs align on that desired outcome. Before we make any decisions, before we try to move forward, I've had instances where 3 or 4 of the heirs are in agreement and they want to move forward, but we have one person or we have 2 people who are not willing to move in that direction. That has to get addressed before you can make any meaningful progress in terms of moving this along. Decision number 2 is that we have to understand the cost of time. And again, as I said earlier, grief is something that is very personal and everyone deals with it differently. Some people need more time to be able to sort through feelings, emotions, whatever comes with that grieving process. However, it's really important to recognize what the carrying cost is of a piece of property. A family that has a home, a family home that's owned free and clear, is in a markedly different position from a family that is carrying a $3,000 a month note mortgage on that property. And so therefore, at the end of it, if it takes 12 months for us to reach consensus on a $2,000 mortgage as we have here on the slide, it's $24,000. On a $3,000 mortgage, it's $36,000 for the year, excluding insurance, excluding property tax, excluding any of the other expenses, repairs, or anything else that may come up. So it's really important for us to understand the cost of time as we're making these decisions, because again, you don't want to delay and to put yourself in a place where you find out that you've lost the property to foreclosure or to delinquent taxes, or there's been an issue and we allowed the insurance policy to lapse because no one paid the premiums, and now here we are with a catastrophe and no insurance to be able to bring the property back in line. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. The third decision is whether or not you're going to sell the property as is, if the decision is to sell, or you're going to do improvements. A lot of times I have heirs tell me, I want to sell it just as it is. And if the property is in good shape, that might be the best decision. However, I strongly advise looking to see where the property is, and is it a situation where a few dollars invested, you invest a couple $1,000s, will that significantly increase the value that you could get back once you put the property on the market? Of course, once we get into the point where we're making repairs or we're doing any type of upgrades, we're now looking at who's going to pay for it. What is the percentage of the contribution? We have multiple people. If it's 2 people, is it 50-50? If it's 3 people, is it a third each? Or based on different financial circumstances and financial needs, does that have to be divvied up differently? Also, you want to take into consideration what the return is going to be on the investment. Again, the plan is not to upgrade where you're doing a full kitchen renovation unless you really think that doing something like that is going to significantly increase the value of the property beyond what it's going to take to do that upgrade. So if it's $20,000 for a kitchen remodel, but if we do the remodel, we'll get $60,000 or $75,000 more on the price, that might be worthy of consideration. If it's $20,000 for the remodel and we may get back 15 or 20 or even 25, that you have to think about a little bit more closely, because it's going to take longer. Once you factor in the other carrying cost, overall, does it make sense for you to do that, to make that improvement, or is it just more practical to move forward with an as-is sale? So again, another decision that has to be made as you're trying to navigate this process. And decision 4, last but not least, handling sales proceeds fairly. This is an area where once money gets involved, people get really hyper-focused. Okay, how are the proceeds going to be divvied up? If we had a situation where folks had to invest ahead of the sale to get the property up to speed, how do they get reimbursed? A big factor as far as the sale is concerned is, what are the tax implications? What are we looking at? Is this going to be a capital gains situation where you're going to owe capital gains tax? Are we looking at long-term versus short-term? Because depending on how long you've held the property, there's all kinds of considerations to keep in mind. And then, of course, what's the documentation? How will the records be managed? How do we maintain transparency so everybody knows what's going on and no one feels that there is any inappropriate behavior, or they're not getting their fair shake, they're not getting their fair percentage of the proceeds? All of that we have to take into consideration. Now, there are some common pitfalls that families, heirs in this situation sometimes face. The first mistake is that they avoid having the difficult conversations, right? No, we don't get along, we're not going to talk, we're just going to stay quiet. But what I have found, is that is probably the biggest mistake, and it leads to the worst possible outcome. When we have an avoidance of the difficult conversations, what happens is invariably somebody feels that they're being left out. Invariably somebody feels that they're not getting to make their voices heard. They're not being asked, or their opinion is not being solicited. We get a tremendous amount of resentment, and it often ends in clashes. It also results in delays, because it takes a long time to get everybody around the table, figuratively, not necessarily literally, and having them to make a decision. So the longer it takes is the more money it's costing. I've had situations where we've had a majority of the heirs agree on a strategy, and there have been a couple holdouts, and so that has resulted in the ones that are in agreement having to take legal action to be able to get motion or to get activity. Again, more expensive, more resentment, less harmony, more delay, just not a good situation for anyone. As a result of these increased costs, the proceeds that people will get, each heir will get, is going to be reduced, because if we have to spend a lot of money just managing up the process beyond that which is mandated or required by law, then everybody is worse off, because everybody ends up getting less. And last but not least, whatever the family dynamic was, whatever the relationship is, that is not improved, it gets worse, and now we have more resentment, less willingness to work together, and just overall an ugly situation. So make sure that if you find yourself in this position, do not be afraid to have the difficult conversations, even if you have to get a third party to come in and be the facilitator, or be the person who is managing discussion, someone who is going to be more of a liaison through the process. Make sure that you have those conversations. The earlier the better, because the less delay that we have is the less costs that are incurred. The less costs that are incurred, the better the outcome is for all of the heirs. Mistake number 2, we let one person just seize control and they're making all of the decisions. That one person is going to handle everything. They make all the decisions. They talk to the attorneys. They are responsible for navigating that process. A couple of things happen when we have situations like that. One, there is some distrust because since no one is actually participating beyond that person in the decision-making process and knowing what is going on, there is mistrust. Ultimately, it ends in resentment for the person who was leading the charge because they feel that they've done a disproportionate amount of work relative to everyone else in this matter. And they're doing that for the same money, and invariably there ends up to be a lot of resentment. We end up with unequal outcomes because now people feel like they need to be compensated for what they've done, and you end up with a ton of financial disputes. It's legendary how the family unit can break down and just really come undone trying to settle an estate that has been left to multiple heirs. So you really want to try, in the interest of peace and a favorable outcome, you want to try to make sure that you don't delegate everything to one person. It's still something where everyone is engaged. It doesn't have to be that every person has the same level of involvement, but everyone should actually be participating in the conversation, in the decision making, even if one person is going to be having a heavier involvement and maybe being the spokesperson for the group. Make sure that everyone is a part of the control and everyone, as much as possible, is contributing to the conversation. And then mistake number 3 is emotional based pricing. That's a big mistake that we see where many families, many heirs overprice. One of the things that is really important to get is to make sure that you're looking at the comps in the area, you're looking at the condition of the property, you're looking at buyer financing realities, insurance in our market in Florida. You have an older roof or you have outdated electrical wiring, it's really difficult to get insurance. So make sure all of the factors, the true condition of the property, what is happening, what you can get, what other properties are selling for, all of that plays a role in the pricing, and it not just be based on emotion. Yes, there's sentimental value. It may have been the home where you grew up. It may have been a place where you have a lot of fond memories. Unfortunately for other people, those memories don't translate into value, and so you want to make sure that you don't overprice, because what will happen is it will sit on the market, and again, carrying costs will exceed what they need to, and the ultimate outcome will be less favorable than it could have been if there was a reasonable price point. So the smart steps moving forward, now that we've gone through all the mistakes, the smart steps moving forward is to establish a legal foundation. You want to make sure that we know who owns it. We have a decision-making process that's been laid out, that's been agreed upon by everyone. We align as a group of heirs on shared objectives. It's really important to make sure that we are all in agreement as to what the ultimate outcome is going to be on this. Another thing to make sure that you do is calculate the true cost. If we're going to sell the property, what are those costs? An attorney is involved, a reasonable estimate of what those costs are, and any of the other costs that are needed to move the process along. You want to make sure that you do a realistic estimate of what those costs are. Importantly, create communication rules, right? We're going to meet once every other week via Zoom at 7 o'clock on Tuesday. Is that good for everyone? If not, we'll change the time. But set up a cadence of communication so that even if there's nothing to discuss, if there's not much to say, it can be a short call. And today with technology and Zoom, there's no reason for everybody not to get on a call to be able to participate. Set up a time, we get on the call, hey guys, good to see everyone. Nothing has happened. I spoke to John Brown. Attorney Brown said that we're doing ABC. We're going to be getting XYZ, but there's no update yet. Let's circle back at our next scheduled meeting. I'll let everybody know if something happens before that. That way, clarity, communication. No one thinks that they're being left in the dark, and it just facilitates the whole process of keeping the family unit moving along towards the desired objective. And then, of course, engage the right professionals. Settling an estate is not a DIY project. It's not the time to do it yourself. It's something that you want to make sure that you get professionals involved. You want to get somebody to help you with the legal aspect of it. You want somebody who is going to help you with the real estate aspect of it, just to make sure that you make the best possible decisions. One note on the legal aspect of it, make sure that you get recommendations for an attorney to help you. I've worked with several people who've had some really difficult times getting in touch with the attorney that they've hired to help them through the process. I've also talked to people who have had issues getting in touch with the real estate professional that they've hired to help them through the process. So one of the questions that you're asking when you're bringing these people to the table before you bring them on is, how do I reach you and how responsive are you? You call your professional, either attorney or real estate professional, and it takes 4 days for them to get back to you. That's probably not the person that you want to have helping you. So make sure that you're clear on that on the front end, because again, in this process, time is money, and we want to make sure that we do the best that we can for the family and for all of the heirs to the property. All right, so wrapping up. When handled thoughtfully, this is what we have. It preserves the family relationship. It honors the original owner's legacy, because at the end of the day, don't forget, this is a loved one's asset that is being passed on to you. This is their legacy to you. We don't want to get so lost in the finances and in the process that we forget that. It provides some emotional closure. It's the final chapter, and it creates some fair outcomes. It establishes a positive pattern for how the family moves forward. One of the things that's really sometimes overlooked is the fact that when a family member, particularly a parent, a mother or a father dies, the entire family dynamic now has to reorganize itself. A lot of times that family member was the link that kept everybody together. So that all communication went through mom, or dad was the one who was making sure we all got together a few times a year. Now we have to establish a new family dynamic. You don't want to lose the relationship with the rest of the family, as well as losing the connection to your loved one who has passed on. So make sure that you take the steps that you can, extend grace, but make sure that you handle the process as thoughtfully as you can. The exact opposite is true when you handle it poorly. When the process is poorly handled, the relationship is damaged, the inheritance is reduced, because the more we spend, the less we have as a legacy. It sometimes can create lasting resentment. I've been in situations where people are gathered together for a holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, something, and somebody brings up a resentment that happened when mom died, you did X. Mom's been dead for 20 years, and that is still harbored. That is still there. So it can create lasting resentment over what is perceived to be an unfair outcome, and it just complicates the future interactions, and it tarnishes the memory of your loved one. You don't want any of that. It's just not worth it. So what I leave you with is, you don't need to have all the answers today. You just need to start moving forward today. Navigate the process, navigate grief. This is not just a regular real estate transaction. This is complicated. This is emotional. It can be overwhelming, but make sure that you seek the right guidance and that you work with professionals who are going to be, one, responsive to you when you reach out, you get a response and that they're professionals in the area so that they can give you good guidance and help you through the process. If you need any additional information, please feel free to visit my website, simplyaskSharon.com, or you can contact me directly at sharon@smclennan.com. I look forward to helping you in any way that I can, because at the end of the day, all of us go through this at some time in life, and if I'm able to help you and your family navigate a complex property decision with clarity and compassion, that basically is the reason why I do what I do. I hope this video has been helpful. Please reach out if you need any assistance. Thank you for watching. See you next time.